Okay, number 15, we are looking for an interval where the function is positive. First thing I did was I graphed it on Desmos, which you can see right here. When I type it in just like it says, it shows me this graph. It actually is a parabola that comes kind of down here or whatever. But the important parts are where is it positive? And we are always positive above the x-axis. So we want everything that's above the x-axis, which is all of this and all of this. So when my x value is anything to the left of -3 or to the right of +5, then I'm going to be positive. That is answer B. Here's one other way that you could see that. If I were to graph this, and instead of graphing it just like it's written here, if I graph it where I say it's greater than or equal to 0, because positive is greater than, not greater than or equal to, just greater than 0, then that will give me a shaded graph. So let me undo this and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just overlapping that one right on top here. And now you can see two things. You can see that I made it as a greater than or equal to 0. So it shaded everything to the left and to the right of -5 and +3. So that one might make a little bit more sense. Remember, if I'm positive, I'm greater than 0. That should just say greater than, not equal to. And if it said negative, I would go less than. All right. The next one here, I'm solving over complex numbers. So x squared is equal to -144. To solve that, I take the square root of both sides, which gives me that x is equal to the square root of 144 and the square root of -1. The square root of 144 is plus or minus 12, and the square root of -1 is I. So my answer is looking for 12i and -12i. That should be two different solutions that I'm going to choose. All right, moving on. Number 17, I am going to double distribute. So I'm going to do 8 times 8, which is 64. 8 times I, which is positive 8i. Then I'm going to change to blue, and I'm going to do -I times 8, which is -8i. And -I times positive I is -I squared. These guys cancel out, so I end up with a 64, just kidding, minus, because there's a minus right here, I squared. Well, I squared, if you remember, I squared is equal to -1, because the square root of -1 is I. So if I square both sides, I get I squared equals -1. So I can plug in a -1. 64 minus -1 is 65. Contrarily, if we go and factor this expression, we're going to take the square roots of both of these. So we're going to get 5x, because the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of x squared is x, and 36, the square root is 6. Because it's a plus, I'm going to make it a plus 6i, and I'm going to write the same thing and write it a minus 6i. When it is a positive there, we have to have that I in order to change this from a negative to a positive. Okay, on our next one, I am going to take this guy and graph it. So let me grab that and throw it in here for you. All right, so when I graphed it, it's right here above the problem. We can see that the vertex is 5, 3. That tells me that this guy, A, can't be it, because it says plus 53. Kind of got caught off on my copy. This says plus 3. Hey, that looks like an HK to me. A sounds great. The domain is all real numbers because it's a quadratic, and the quadratic domains are always all real numbers. It means they go on forever and ever to the left and to the right. And it says it has a minimum, which is true. It has a low point at what? X equals 5 and Y equals 3. Looks like that one works too. Remember, select all that apply means I need to pick 2 or more. Okay, both of these are quadratic formula. So we have to know what the quadratic formula is in order to be able to do these problems. So if you have forgotten, it's x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So here's my a is 1. B is -8, and C is 13. So I'm just going to plug all that in. So that's going to be, let's see, opposite of B, which is 8, plus or minus the square root of -8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 13, all divided by 2 times 1. So I'm going to plug that into my calculator, and I'm only going to plug in this bit right here underneath the radical. I'm not going to plug in everything. I'm not going to plug in the radical. I'm only going to plug in that one little section. And that gives me 12. So I've got 8 plus or minus the square root of 12 all over 2. So what I'm going to do is simplify it, because I know that the square root of 12 is really the square root of 4 and the square root of 3, so that's 2 radical 3. That's going to give me 8 plus or minus 2 radical 3 over 2. I know I can chop all the coefficients here in half because they're all divisible by 2, and that gives me 4 plus or minus radical 3, which means I get C and A. Now, if you're not sure how to do this on the test tomorrow, or how to get from, you all are great at getting here but can't simplify, you can always type in to your computer, into the Desmos, you could type in 8 plus radical 12 all over 2, and then you could type in 4 plus, because it's a plus here, radical 3, and see if you get the same decimal. You will. If you do it the other way, 8 minus radical 12 over 2, and then type in with the minus, and you get the same decimal, cha-ching, then those are the ones you want to pick. You can always check these others too and just make sure that you didn't make a mistake, but you're looking for the same decimal. On the second one here, this A is 2, B is 24, and C is 102. So I'm going to plug that into the quadratic formula. So I have 24 plus or minus the square root of 24 squared minus 4 times 2 times 102, all divisible by 2 times 2. So that's 24 plus or minus the square root of -240, all divided by 4. Now, I'm going to be a little bit proactive here, and I'm going to say I'm pretty sure that 240 is going to break down into the square root of -1, the square root of 16, and the square root of something. 240 divided by 16 is 15. I only do that because I know the square root of 16 is 4, and I have this 4 in the basement here in the denominator. So that's going to break this down into 24 plus or minus the square root, let's actually start back there, 4i square root of 15 all over 4. Then again, I can go and chop. These are all divisible by 4. And so I'm going to get 6 plus or minus I radical 15. And that'll be my final answer. Now, again, it's multiple choice, so you might go and start here. When you put this in your calculator, you got to let go of the negative. And when you put this answer in my calculator, I have to let go of the I. So if I want to use that kind of trick to check the decimals, you can do that, but you have to be careful. All right, last one, and all we have to do here is type this bad boy into Desmos. Left-hand side goes in as a y equals, and the right-hand side goes in as a y equals. So that's what I have right here and right here. And then we're looking at rounding to the nearest tenth. So this is going to be -8.3, because this 9 bumps this up, and that bumps this up. Then over here, I'm going to be at a 2.05 because this 9 bumps this guy up to a 4. So those would be the two solutions I'm looking for. All right, good luck, guys. If you have questions, let me know. We'll be taking our common assessment on Wednesday.